Next stop, Chicago Junction.
Yes, we're back on the air, and it's time for this month's broadcast of Chicago Junction, the program that takes you through the wonderful world of trains. And the help of our panel of experts, and sometimes we have calling guests and visitors who help out also. I am your announcer, Brian Valou, and here's our boss, the head of the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network, and Chief Engineer, Mr. John DeVita.
Well, thank you very much, Brian, and welcome back. It's been a long journey that we have been since we've been together. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another broadcast of Chicago Junction from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network on Wednesday, July the 8th, the year 2020. Today, the panel will be talking about railroads and model railroads. And now to start today's broadcast, here's our announcer, Mr. Brian.
Well, thank you, John. And we're going to talk and meet the panel, starting with myself. I am Brian Valou, retired Navy, retired railroader, and I love railroads. I love trains. I member of several organizations like the NRHS, National Railway Historical Society Chicago Chapter, of which I'm a director. I'm a member of this group right here, and I play with trains. I'm a garden railroader, and I love my Lionel. And just like talking trains. And I have help right here, and also promote the safety of it as a member of Operation Lifesaver. And as we go along, we'll also talk about several museums and such, and I'm lucky to be a member of some of them. One of the places where I was stationed in Reading, Pennsylvania, and also in San Diego. So now we'll talk to you. Now next is my co-host for the day.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Kevin Berry. I'm a retired Chicago police sergeant, lifetime Lionel operator and collector, at least starting at Christmas when I turned 7. I am a director with the Chicagoland Lionel Railroad Club out in New Lenox, Illinois. I'm a member of the Lionel Car Collectors Association. Proud grandparent of 2 grandkids who I have successfully introduced to the Legion of Lionel operators. They each have their Thomas train, one Thomas and one James. Love trains. Got involved with the big trains, the real trains, as a not too freshly minted sergeant setting up security when they were running steam trips out of 103rd and Stony Island. Got to ride the 611. Got to get close enough to almost touch the 1218. Rode the doubleheader, the Mikado and the Berkshire, from 103rd Street out to Argus, Indiana, where they wired it. The local fire department put on the picnic lunch, and wound up in the video with a rather unflattering back shot showing my waist being a little wider than it is now. But, you know, my kids have all loved to ride trains. You know, and we're short a few people tonight. One guy's suffering a little bit with a medical malady, and another guy is sheltering in place. And another gentleman has a birthday, and of course we are without our leader, but I'm sure he is here in spirit. So we're going to get talking about trains.
Yes. And I'll start it off with Amtrak news. We always have some prototype stuff in the beginning. And Amtrak is in the news for a lot of things. Some good, some bad. Amtrak is preparing to cut up to 20% of its workforce in the next fiscal year, as the National Railroad continues to suffer from huge decline in ridership as the coronavirus pandemic brought most travel to a halt. Ridership and ticket revenue at the company has fallen by 95% since the pandemic began. Chief Executive Bill Flynn told Amtrak workers in an internal memo on Tuesday. While Amtrak is planning to slowly restart some service halted during the lockdown, including the Washington to Boston Excel Express service on June 1st, the company projects riderships in 2021 will rebound just half of what it was before the crisis. This may sound easy, but the jump back will be hard. To return to even half the road's past ridership will require substantial growth over the next 16 months, and will have to be achieved against the backdrop of stunning unemployment, social economic dislocation, and potential recession. Amtrak employs more than 18,000 people nationwide and plans to make the job cuts by October, the memo stated, starting the start of Amtrak's 2021 fiscal year. An Amtrak spokeswoman said, Amtrak will begin its job reductions by offering buyouts and retirement incentives, Ms. said in the memo, before we resort to involuntary separations. A spokeswoman for the Trades Department, AFL-CIO, and the coalition of unions that includes Amtrak workers declined to comment at this time. I guess they can trying to censor out what they were going to say. The pandemic has devastated the finances of the railroad, which has been steadily reducing its adjusted operating losses in recent years. The company received more than $1 billion as part of the CARES Act to cover an operating shortfall in the current fiscal year, and executives have acknowledged that the railroad will need additional financial help to cover shortfalls in ticket revenue in the coming years as they wait for passenger demand to return. Amtrak has already cut $215 million in capital expenses this year and is targeting $600 million of further reductions, like delayed station improvements and property acquisitions. CFO Tracy Windbigler told employees last month. Meanwhile, the company has been trying to conserve $2.7 billion in cash on its balance sheet that have been earmarked for major projects, including replacement of aging passenger cars along its heavily traveled Washington to Boston corridor.
Amtrak has done one thing correct, and they deserve to be recognized for it. The food items that they had in their refrigerated warehouses for the trains that still had diner cars, they split that up. Half of it went to the West Coast, I believe, to Seattle, and the other half went down to New Orleans to help in the food kitchens down there. Rather than let it go to waste, at least they donated it to somebody who needed it.
We'll get to why it was going to waste.
Yeah, well, I think we talked about that once upon a time.
Yeah. Well,
go ahead.
It made Congress this past week.
Finally.
Last week, actually. New Accela makes test run in Pennsylvania. The replacement Accelas that are being built at this time are, the first one is out in Colorado, and the second one has been running on basically Philadelphia to Harrisburg lines testing and such, and getting up speeds, and they're getting further along as they keep going. Like the next ones will be to, making its way to Washington, making its way to New York. And, well, the one that's being tested on everything out in Colorado, it reached 165 miles an hour. So it could run at normal high-speed train speed. And there we go. Congress. I know. Oxymoron in itself. In Transportation Bill, a call for finer dining on Amtrak. In the last few years, the last three, actually the last two, the new one that's in now, they put him in the frying pan, but it's not his fault. But they are trying to run it like airlines. And when the head of Amtrak faced the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee, Republican Steve Cohen unloaded his frustration with the railway, specifically food service. Remembering a trip from Memphis to Chicago as a child, when he sampled outstanding French toast, the thickest filet mignon, Amtrak's decision in September to replace that was last year, what it calls flexible dining, the prepackaged reheatable meals.
So they're serving MREs on Amtrak now?
That's what they were serving, while the good food, like you say, was in
warehouses.
And they took it and they got rid of it. Yeah, that way they get a tax write-off. You should consider the humanity, romance, and appeal to train travel with food, which is important and good, said the Tennessee Democrat, who in March munched from a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken. At a Judiciary Committee impeachment hearing to underscore his suggestion that the Attorney General, William Barr, is afraid to attend. Cohen's frustration with the state of dining on Amtrak isn't just one lawmaker's whim. Amtrak's decision to forego its traditional white tablecloth dining experience on most long-distance routes east of the Mississippi River, and at least temporarily during the pandemic on all long-distance routes, has sparked outrage among the labor unions and rail passenger groups. It also inspired 6 pages about Amtrak food service in the 2,309-page House Democratic Infrastructure Bill that will be debated on the floor. It sparked more fundamental criticism about Amtrak itself. The company's decision to cut the popular service is part of an effort to make long-distance routes, which long have been a target proposed Trump administration budget cuts, as unattractive as possible.
I can remember vividly reading Zephyr by Henry Kaiser and having my mouth water as I was reading the recipes and the menus. And the idea of overnight or multiple day travel without having an actual hot meal, and I don't consider a hot cup of coffee a hot meal. I might as well fly, because I know I'm going to get bad food on the airplane. Overpriced bad food at that.
The ideological benefits of phasing out long-distance trains appears to be a worthwhile price for them to pay, even if they lose some revenue on the deal. Peter Allen, chairman of the Lackawanna Coalition, an independent nonprofit organization that advocates better rail passenger service. He says cutting the dining service is a very effective way of discouraging riders. The Democrats' bill would require the railway to create food and beverage working group staffed by representatives of Amtrak, labor, and nonprofits. Representing passengers would provide input on the menu, co-filing the notion that the passengers would get a say in what they eat on Amtrak. Amtrak isn't weighing in on the work group proposal, simply saying supports the proposed historic investment in rail. We look forward to continuing to work with Congress as they considered surface transportation reauthorization. The overall bill, $29 billion for Amtrak over 5 years. And how much of that transportation bill will go to highway? Jim Matthews, President and CEO of Rail Passenger Association in Washington. When Amtrak was created in 1971, it was done to provide services to places private industry was unwilling to serve. The government subsidies provided by taxpayers would benefit the communities served by Amtrak, bringing in visitors, jobs, and possible tourist dollars. Amtrak is not supposed to make a profit. They make money for the communities they serve. But the focus, he says, has shifted. When Congress passed the last surface transportation law in 2015, it included language pushed then by Representative John Mika, requiring Amtrak to develop and implement a plan to eliminate the losses from its food and beverage service in 5 years. That wasn't the first time Congress took aim at Amtrak's food services. Amtrak required by Congress to turn a profit from its food and beverage service in 1981, but the railroad did not comply. And then it goes on with a lot of... Basically, Congress itself is at odds with Amtrak.
Well, any person that is knowledgeable knows that Amtrak was supposed to last between 12 and 18 months and then go bankrupt. Nixon never intended for Amtrak to be a viable organization. But with the fuel crisis in the 70s, thank God Amtrak was around. And when my eldest daughter was going to school at Champaign-Urbana, she could catch the Redbird out in Homewood, Illinois, and it would take her right to Champaign, which would allow her to study more comfortably. It'd be taking the overcrowded and underventilated bus that left 4 hours earlier and arrived 2 hours later. So she got to come home more often. And for a lot of college kids, Amtrak is a necessity.
Yes, it was.
And still is.
It actually still is. But a lot of the perks for riding it for students, military and such, and even the elderly, has been taken away. The whole talk about this is the fact, they feel, the people that want it are hoity-toity that travel first class. No, it's not just for the hoity-toity. It's for the common man.
It's for the working folk and grandma that wants to see her grandkids.
Right. Well, let's get to some good news.
Okay. You got some?
The Age of Steam Museum is open. June 18th, opened up. Did its first doors. Now, yes, they are limited to the number of people they have going in. They're following the safety rules for distance and, number of people. You have to pre-buy your tickets online. and get them when you get there. It's great because, this way slowly things are open. 2 weeks ago, they opened, Heston opened up. And again, they were following the rules. They had first distancing and such like that. Trains were not running, but they did have the sawmill up and running when I called and talked to them. And yes, they were working. I believe they did run trains over the weekend, 4th of July weekend. So that's good.
I got an email survey end of last week from the Cuyahoga Valley Scenic Railroad. They were asking everybody on their mailing list, number one, are you interested in coming back? Number two, what are you looking for us to do to provide the safest possible environment for you? And they're already talking about doing their Polar Express runs, which would have to be beautiful. I can't see the Cleveland area without snow in the wintertime.
It has happened.
Oh, there's been snow here in Chicago in June.
That's true.
A friend of my parents had snow on their wedding day in June in the mid-50s. And I want to see everything up and running. I wanted to see the Steam Rail Institute up in Owasso running, with the Polar Express.
Mm-hmm.
The actual steam train, not the standby diesel. It was, it was a very nice trip when my wife and I did it last year. But some of the romance was gone because we had to do it behind the diesel because of mechanical problems with the steam engine. But,
Mm-hmm.
people deserve to be able to ride trains. My grandkids have ridden on the Orange Line L. I want to get them out and, when they come up to visit, to ride the Chicago South Shore and South Bend from Hegwich Station down to downtown, and spend the day prowling around Shed Aquarium. And then, on another trip, I want to get them on the Metro and go downtown for the Kris Kringle Mart. Let them see what trains are like.
Oh yeah. The Hoosier Valley Railroad Museum in North Judson, they opened the 4th of July weekend.
Good for them.
And again, they, ensuring everybody follows the policies set forth by the governors and such. Strasburg Railroad was open and steaming.
Yeah.
Again, pre-purchasing tickets. Monticello will not be opening until August. But again, it might change. Date to be determined, and see if the tickets are sale for certain weekends. Steam train, the steam locomotive down there, they pulled it out of service basically a year early, so it'll start its 15-year overhaul.
Well, they've had three months, to get a head start on it.
Yes, but remember, some of those months nobody could be out there.
That's true too. I have no idea if the Illinois Railway Museum is open or not.
I went to the website, didn't have anything. but they might have stuff now.
Yep.
Now, good news.
Please.
Well, that was good.
Give me the good stuff.
Okay, narrow gauge back east of the Mississippi. East Broad Top Railroad, Orbizona, Pennsylvania. Saved by a gentleman, a scrapper, saved the railroad intact.
Wow.
All the buildings are intact. There's a group called Friends of the East Broad Top, and they've gone out with their services to try to shore up buildings, paint, and do such. And they've been promised over several years by the Pennsylvania state, government for funds and such. Ain't happened yet, really. But last year, or the beginning of the year, well, I guess it started last year, they got a group of gentlemen together, got some money together, and basically, except for the final 5 miles into Mount Union, it's all owned by the East Broad Top. The Friends have been buying 5 miles at a time. They've got a board of directors. Bennett Levine from Pennsylvania. He's got the Juniata switching. He owns several Pennsylvania cars, private cars that put out. He's one of the board members. Lynn Modigger, retired president of Strasburg. He is on the board. And in fact, Strasburg went and inspected the locomotives. They pulled 2 locomotives out, and they're going to be up and running in 2021.
Just in time for the LCCA convention in Strasburg.
And you'll have to go towards Pittsburgh. And
as long as they're up and running, if you have to go towards Pittsburgh, you're still riding live behind live steam.
Right. Now, one of the branch lines goes up to Rocky Hill Furnace, and a trolley museum on that branch going up came about, and that is where you'll find the second electroliner, or as they called it in Philadelphia, a Liberty liner.
Okay.
And that 4-car set does run. They got trolley poles on it, because when they were running on the Norristown line, it had third rail.
Had a boot, yeah.
But yeah, you could do that. In fact, they got one of the first San Diego streetcars of the new streetcar system built by Siemens in their collection now.
Cool.
It's amazing the progress that's being made with this. The membership has zoomed in the Friends of the East Broad Top. They got a nice newsletter, and they're doing everything they can to get it. Now we have news on Hawaii. The Lahaina, Kanapali, and Pacific Railroad. The name that's longer than the train. Has been running since 1970. And it's a tourist line on the island of Maui. And it's 6 miles long, and it runs through the sugarcane fields. Well, a few years ago, if you went to ride it, you had to be careful. There were no more sugarcane fields. Development. And everything took a beating, the railroad is officially closed. 3-foot narrow gauge. The motive power were 2 Porter 040s, saddle tank engines, that were lost their saddle tanks, made tender engines out of them, and put a pilot truck on it, so they were 2 40s. In fact, you have the Annika and the Myrtle, number 3. Myrtle's got a whaleback tender, they call it. Sort of curves over.
Oh, like a Vanderbilt?
Not a Vanderbilt.
Like a Vanderbilt.
No.
Oh?
It's like culvert.
Okay.
It's a culvert basically with ends on it. It doesn't have the firebox where the oil tank is. And in fact, if you want to buy them, they're for sale. Ozark Mountain Railcar is the selling agent for them. They're for sale for $275,000 each.
I'm sure.
Now, you might just have to find a way to truck it off of Maui.
Please help me with this. Ewa Valley Railroad?
Eva Valley.
Eva Valley. You're welcome.
No,
They have 2 narrow gauge steam engines on static display on their little excursion train. But they've got 2, I think they're prior service U.S. Navy Davenports.
They could be a Davenport, or they could be the GEs. And a Wickham. I know there's at least a Wickham there.
But their excursion is pulled by narrow gauge diesel.
Yeah.
But the nice part about it is either they were smart enough to set up a hookup with Disney, or Disney was smart enough to work a hookup with them, because it goes right past Disney's new resort in Hawaii. I mean, literally, you could throw a baseball from the resort property to the terminal.
Well, you know that airfield you passed? That's Barbers Point.
I think you mentioned
that. That was a Navy Air Base. In fact, where it is, that was all cane fields. I know, well, at least it was when I got there in 1972. And they actually had track along the highway going up toward Cayena Point on the west side.
I'm trying to see if I got that picture here with me.
I almost got kicked off that train, too.
Uncle Brian, I don't believe... Yeah, here it is.
Oh.
That one's on static display.
Yeah, they got an 060.
Yeah. They actually
tender engine.
They actually have 2 of them. Here's the other one. The 2 diesels that they have are pretty much standard high visibility yellow and forest green. The only thing that's missing is they painted over the striker on the sides of the cab that said U.S. Navy.
Yeah, they were used. See, Eva is where the if you take go over to where the Eva locks were, and that's where the ammo dump is. And yeah, they had, when you first pulled in, the first time I pulled in there, they had a single locomotive workshop right on the pier, and it went out, and it went towards the back, and you saw all these boxcars back there just sitting there and rusting and such. Oh, it was something. Durango Silverton.
Okay.
Durango Silverton is now running. They've been running, I guess. Started running a few weeks ago. And they're doing 2-hour runs with the steam locomotives. They are in the process of converting another locomotive to oil, so we'll have 2 of them. They're purchasing 2 brand new diesel locomotives, and they're getting 2 from Skagway. The White Pass and Yukon sold them a couple of theirs, and they're going to be used.
Are these going to be the low sulfur diesels, or are these going to be the French fry diesels?
I think the low sulfur. It's they did talk about, they had a nice conversation with Jim Wren and had some good questions asked, like the status and how long is the steam going to still run. Now, we know a lot of the millennials that are now living in Silverton don't understand the history of the train. And, it's no good. But they're trying to make a impasse. That's why they're going for the diesel steam oil burners. And the new diesels, unfortunately we can't show our listeners, but as you can see, they're on shop trucks. They haven't had the motors inserted yet. And they're supposed to be 6-axle locomotives.
Okay. Well, if they got 6-axle or the 3 axles, they'll have a SD designation.
Correct.
They almost look like somebody slapped a GM slant nose hood on a GP9 body.
It does look like that.
But, distinctive paint job.
Yeah. And they said it was like a tribute to the Denver Rio Grande Western.
Yeah, that yellow especially.
Yeah.
It's almost a dark mustard yellow.
Okay, that's let's see.
I got a little bit.
Yeah, I know. I've talked too much.
No, you haven't. I'm gonna get this painful piece of information out first, and then try to build the good stuff from there. An announcement was released in this month's Classic Toy Train, and I'm referring to the July 2020 issue, that after 40 years of fighting the good fight, MTH and Rail King will cease operations in May of 2021. The owner has been the sole owner for 40 years, and he wants to retire. There is a possibility that people from within the organization or someone else may buy MTH and Rail King and their Premier line. It's a spear in the heart to people here in Chicago because MTH is the only outfit that made the F40PH Metras and the only company that made the bi-level Metra passenger cars in O-gauge. Unless you're holding out information on me, Uncle Brian.
Well, there was another company that disappeared that did make them. K-Line.
I know K-Line made the engine because I have a K-Line engine, but I never saw any K-Line bi-level passenger cars.
Yeah, they made them.
Well, K-Line's been gone almost 15 years now. So,
but like you say, and the electronic portion has been taken over.
Well, that's good.
All the electronics for the DCS will be there. That came out a couple of weeks ago.
That's great.
Well, yeah. Well, he's not. They're not the only one. In GH, right from Indiana, the Heartland Locomotive Works, HLW, they are stopping production and, selling their parts and such.
Okay. Well, for those of you...
That's for G-Gauge.
For those of you who are jonesing to, get around real equipment, on Sunday, July 26th at 7 p.m. Central Time, the 20th Century Railroad Club, 20th Century members, travelers, and supporters, there will be a virtual tour of the Wisconsin Great Northern Railway, and in cooperation with the Midwest Rail Rangers, of a special behind-the-scenes look at the Wisconsin Great Northern Railroad's bed and breakfast dinner train. They just released a one-paragraph blurb about it on the 6th of July, so I would imagine sometime around the 20th of July, if you went to their website, which is www.20thcentury.org, you can pick up more information. Personally, I intend to try to view it. They say you don't have to have a Facebook or YouTube account for this presentation. Now, Uncle Brian walked in and proceeded to put me in a foul mood because he says he's adding a 10-foot by 10-foot extension on his layout at home, and I think he's in cahoots with Menards, because Menards just released a whole bunch of new buildings, including the Cripple Creek Lumber Yard with a bi-level lumber stacking facility, 3 overworked, underpaid yardmen, and their supervisor, Jack the dog. And it's $89.99. And Menard has also come out with a couple of other things. They came out with I call it a front. Brian tells me it's correctly addressed as a facade. But basically, it's just the front face of a building. And for those of you who can't figure out how to hide that ugly corner on the layout, where the two walls of the basement come together. This would be a great thing. And believe it or not, it's an M&M warehouse with these six M&M characters, including green. So, that's going to look really good. Menards is doing wonderful things with Woodland Scenics. They have brought a couple out that are resin cast, but most of their stuff is really nice. They also have come out with a series of graffitied and weathered boxcars. Santa Fe, Burlington Northern, Southern, and Pennsylvania. And their 11% rebate madness continues. Now, a while back, I got an email, probably because I had ordered something from Kalmbach at some point, or inquired, and they they electronically reprinted an article from the Classic Toy Trains blog by a Renee Schweitzer on the 15th of June, and she talked about other sources for people for the layout. Homies, and I brought a few in with me tonight. Hero Clicks. Personally, I've taken the Batman and the Robin Hero Clicks and separated them from their $50 size base, because I don't care how much power they have and how much damage they can absorb, but they go real well with a 1/43 scale Batmobile. An outfit called Nano Metal Figs released 25 or 26 Harry Potter figures. They've also released SpongeBob SquarePants. They make really nice figures. There's a company by the name of Toob, Toob, and Mini Winnies, Mini common spelling, Winnies, Winnies, that do small scale horses. Tube makes animals that do a nice representation of a municipal zoo, or if you're lucky enough to have the circus wagons that K-Line brought out about 15 or so years ago, the tiger looks real good in the animal cage. Trinket and gumball dispensers. Barbie came out of a gumball dispenser. They've also taken figures out of Clue, and they're painted solid color, so you got to start out by base coating them in flesh or tan or sand, and then paint them up. But they look nice. Thrift stores, you can get cars and figures and stuff from thrift stores. Usually they sell them by the bag. And there's a company by the name of All Star MVP, and you can buy 2 complete football teams for I think $15, and they're very close to being the right size. But I mean, it's good. As someone reminded me, when you have a layout, most people aren't going to put the time and effort and agony into making it a prototypical layout. What you're building is a fantasy layout, because not all the buildings are 1/48 scale, and then you got to run true O scale engines in cars. The Plasticville buildings were designed to work with Lionel and American Flyer, and those two scales tolerate each other, but they're not the same. The Chicagoland Lionel Railroad Club is presenting its 31st club car. It is a Lion scale PS1 boxcar, die-cast trucks in reefer orange, in Santa Fe markings, with the Santa Fe Circle Cross herald at one end and the Santa Fe all the way at the other. It has an American flag on one end of the car because it is made in the United States at Concord, North Carolina, in Lionel's plant, and it has the Chicagoland Lionel Club logo at the other end. If you are interested in it, please go to clrctrains.com, click on info, and ask on price and availability. The car is 11.5 inches long. I have seen a photo of the prototype. I already have ordered one for myself. I don't normally model Santa Fe, but it's a nice looking boxcar with separately applied ladders and brake wheels, and it'll look good on anybody's railroad. And if you happen to be into Pennsylvania or Reading, then you're going to have to pay trackage for a Santa Fe car. Now, if you're a 60s guy, you model 60s. I was leafing through the Diecast Direct catalog. They have a 65 Corvair Monza. And I believe the asking price was either $795 or $895. Personally, I'm going to get one, and it's going to pop up at the drive-in at the Chicagoland Lionel Railroad Club.
And who's making that? Is that Menards?
It's offered through Diecast Direct.
Okay.
They're down in Louisville, I think. Maybe Louisville, Knoxville. It spells out just like it sounds. DIECAST direct.com. Real nice people to deal with.
No, I know you're talking about.
You know, I'm going to get one. I'm sorely tempted to get the 49 Ford delivery truck with the B&O maintenance away herald on the front doors. Now we were talking about homies, and they got the cook and they got the waiter with the towel over his arm and the pizza in his hand. And I've already been notified that I have been requested to show up and run trains in support of the historic Pullman Foundation candlelight house tour in December. There used to be a restaurant that was near and dear to everybody in historic Pullman and all the police officers that worked out of the 5th District in Chicago when it was at 115th in Indiana, and it was at 115th and Front Street. It was called Pezzaventos. So I'm going to take a building. I don't know which one I'm going to take, and I'm going to rework it, and it's going to become Pezzaventos Restaurant at 115th and Front. Pezzaventos isn't there anymore. It's a church now, but a lot of fond memories from when I was much younger and a lot less civilized. But you know, I showed Brian what I have here. There's homies. I brought some little green aliens that are about an inch tall, and Brian will talk about those in a little bit. I brought some angels, the aliens and the angels, and Jimmy Neutron, and the Simpsons, and I've got an African American gentleman with his 5.5 foot tall walking stick. Those all came out of gumball machines. And I've got a guy here who looks like he belongs on an airfield. And he actually did belong on an airfield, but he is cast in olive drab. So he's painted up, and he's in an orange jumpsuit and an orange hat, and orange earphones with a face mic and black leather gloves. So he went from being in the service to commercial airfield. Almost any size commercial airfield you want to put him on. I also brought in a Harley motorcycle that I picked up in Frankenmuth, Michigan at the arcade. I was playing the skee ball, and it was one of those machines that spit out tickets, and I've got 5 or 6 of these things, and believe it or not, they're the right scale for Lionel. If you shop around carefully, Hot Wheels and whatever the knockoff brand for Hot Wheels is that shows up in Walgreens, they will occasionally come out with motorcycles that are the correct size. I've got a couple of different police motorcycles that I picked up brand new for either 99 cents or $1.29. I know one of the motorcycles, the markings on it are definitely UK markings because they're white with the blue and gold checkerboard. But that's okay because I've got a couple of UK cars. I've got a couple of Irish Garda, the National Police of Ireland. When people go traveling, well, what do you want me to bring you back? Well, if you happen to see a police car, so I've got Italian police cars, I've got German police cars, I've got a police car from the Netherlands. I do have one RCMP car. It's a 91 Bubble Chevy. So look around. Go to toy shows. You can still pick up Road Champ cars. They were $5 when they came out in the 90s. Unless they're a rare one, you can still pick them up for about $10. And every once in a while, you'll get lucky and you get one that's converted and it's got flashing lights in the Mars bar and the headlights and the tail lights, and you can get that for $25 or $30. So look, Brian.
Yes.
Tell me about what you brought for show and tell.
Well, for show and tell, I actually bought. It is a 4850 TM. Lionel makes them. They're trackmobiles. Trackmobiles have been around actually a long time. They came into existence in the 20s and such because a lot of the dock railways in the streets and such in Baltimore, New York, and very sharp curves. 040s could make them, but anything larger, no. And they actually have a story on one from Pennsylvania Railroad. Looks like a early center cab electric locomotive, except it has hard rubber tires, and its steering wheel is basically a ship's wheel.
Okay.
big wood, and turning it in the middle, and you turn the chain. And they're still in use today. Most of them are used in industries to do with their own switching and such. But there are still some street running where the curves are tight, and these fit the bill real nice.
You can see one 2 or 3 times a day, every day of the week, at 38th Place, or just north of 38th Place in Morgan. And it's a hustle wagon.
But this one, again, we go with whimsy. See, a lot of people, like you say, some modelers like scale buildings and such like that, and they want to do specific eras and such. I admit, I play with trains. I think of nothing putting an observation car, having this pull it around. But
there's no reason why visitors can't ride in luxury.
Now, the one I have is painted for Area 51. Lionel came out with a few sets. I happen to have 3 of them. And with flying saucers, and he mentioned where I was going to build a 10 by 10, is because I'm making a specific layout for a military base. I have several military diesels, trains. Heck, somehow I ended up with 5 submarine cars that are all different and new. I got like the USS Houston, the Lionel Club in Houston, put out several cars. So I got the 6 cars that they put out. Nice little train. Red, white, and blue. The good old Texas Lone Star. But, so I was going to make that, I'm making like a base. There's going to be a little ammo dump in it that have little hills. And, but I got enough tank cars for Crater Lake and Groom Lake and for whatever gunk is in there. And so I got to make a tank farm, a little small tank farm, make some buildings. I got to make a refrigerator building for some of the bodies that we got traveling around. I've got a couple suspension cars with bodies in them, and even one aquarium car. And then we have bobbing heads and smokes and weird noises. And so, combining military with that, it's, like trying to find the airplane hangar number 1 up in Wright Pat. And it has these little homies that Kevin was talking about, and they're little green.
Those were out of a gumball machine. Now, I haven't seen any gumball machines with figures anyplace else other than Orland Mall, and I'm going to butcher this word, and you're going to have to correct me because you've spent time on the other side of the Pacific Ocean.
Mm-hmm.
But Gashapon, I guess they're a very popular animated or cartoon series.
Okay.
And they actually have, it's a kiosk with 12 machines on either side. And they've got all these Gashapon figures, and then they've got Disney Dark Kingdom figures.
Okay.
If that's what particularly interests you. Another option is there's a Gamer's Workshop out at 158th and LaGrange on the west side of the street, and they play variations on the Warhammer games. they've got some great stuff.
That sounds good.
My, if you remember the old Disney movie, Darby O'Gill and the Little People,
Yeah.
the Coach de Ball, somebody gave me a Victorian coach. It was painted up in brown with red pinstriping. I spray painted the whole thing black and then built the entire trace and then got 4 of these they're like skeletal death riders with skeletal horses. And I don't know what I did with the death riders, but those 4 skeletal horses pull the Coach de Ball. And it makes a really nice addition at Halloween. But, I mean, they've got Imperial Space Marines that would work great with Area 51.
Oh, definitely.
Or if you happen to have the Lionel Phantom trains, Classic Toy Trains actually recommended the Imperial Space Marines when the Phantom trains first came out. I mean, you have to look at what they have to offer. They've got trees that are, they're basically dead trees stripped of all their foliage. But if you're willing to spend a little time and work with them, you can paint them out as either standing dead trees or standing burnt trees, or you can not put them in their base and with a file work off the little peg that goes into the base. Then you can have a fallen tree. I have a really gnarly looking mama dragon with some dragon pups and some dragon eggs just hatching. Of course, the way I got her painted up, she looks like a giant lake trout.
Oh, that's the way to do it, though. See, but you have fun, don't you?
You have to have fun.
See, that's the whole thing about railroading. You gotta have fun. If you're doing it and you're not having fun, why? Do we have different views on railroading? Yeah. Me, I like to play with trains. I would love to be a fine modeler. My father was. And I'm sorry I can't do it like him, but... And like one of the railway museums I belong to, they came out with something, and I thought about this. In the time that we've been off, been doing research and such, and a lot of other people. Oh, how do you do research? Well, you can start with Googling. But they came out with a list in the newsletter this month for the Reading Company Technical and Historical Society, and for the museum that they have in Hamburg, Pennsylvania. And they're telling people, oh, how do you do it? You just research the internet. But there's more archival libraries that are putting historical photos online, so you can get there. It's so good. The John W. Barringer National Railroad Library at flickr.com, photos, Barringer Library Sets. There's an album specifically for the Reading Railroad photos, plus the Lewis collection and the AFC collections also have a good bit of Reading material. Now, they're biased towards the railroad that's the hometown. The Technical Society Museum itself is known to have the largest collection of equipment for a single railroad. In fact, in March, they received 2 more locomotives that were found. A GP39-2, which was from the last group of locomotives purchased by the Reading Company before Conrail. And all 20 of them that were purchased were sent to the Delaware and Hudson Railroad. After 20 years, they were sent to the CSX. And this one, they were getting ready to retire it and scrap it. And CSX actually repainted it and everything else. And fully operational. They kept the batteries in it. And they delivered that to it. They came. So, and the other locomotive was an SW-12 that was sold to the Stockton Terminal Railroad in California. It went through various ownerships and such, bought from a used locomotive salesman, and they sent it back, and all they needed is to get batteries for it. And they were moving it with an NW2 that is a Reading original that was found working at a steel mill. And they've got it up and running, working, number 103, and in Reading Company paint, and towed it back to the museum.
That's wonderful.
And you could look in the picture and you'll see an Alco sitting behind the switcher, and that was from the Green Bay and Western Railroad. It was a Reading locomotive that Green Bay and Western bought, and they got it from Green Bay and Western. So this is a fantastic museum, and they're finally opening to the public again, doing the requested limitations of the number of people and such, and fighting out. But looking for history, Hagley Museum, Library Company of Philadelphia, Penn Pilot. You want maps? Penn State or any university usually has maps of the area. Historic Map Works, they'll get you. The Library of Congress has Reading and other related materials. When I was helping out a friend, Fred Haberkamp, remember we had him here as a guest a while back. He was building his own forney, and he's getting along quite good with it now. And when we were looking for the blueprints, we found out some of the blueprints we found were at SMU in Texas. They had blueprints for Reading, for Baldwin locomotives, and we were able to get some diagrams that we needed for certain parts.
Parts.
And plus, there was some through the Pennsylvania State Railroad Museum, and also in Harrisburg. They have a big collection. They had tractor trailers still loaded with blueprints in it, and they were slowly cataloging them all and actually running them through a copier.
Digitizing them?
Yeah, doing
surprisingly, if you go over to Cabela's, just over the Indiana state line on 80, you get off at exit 2 for Hammond. If you go up to the Black Bear Cafe, the tables, and they're not massive tables, they're like 3 foot by 3 foot, but the tops of the tables are maps that have Chicago way up in the one far corner, and it's pretty much all Indiana, but it shows where the major rail lines ran. So I mean, you can literally follow the rail line from 103rd and Stony Island all the way out to Fort Wayne while you're having lunch.
Oh yeah, that's good stuff.
Oh, that's great stuff.
And I think we are coming to the end.
Yeah, just one more thing that we need to do that we promised that we would do.
We have one last item to take care of. We're a little bit late behind it. But this is for our fallen comrade, Jack Ryan, who had passed away earlier. And we never got around to doing our finale, which we were supposed to do the following month when pandemic hit. So this is for Jack Ryan. No, let it go.
And may your dear soul, Jack Ryan, rest in peace. You have been listening to Chicago Junction on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on Wednesday, July the 8th, the year 2020. Chicago Junction was produced and directed by John DeVita, and our special thanks to the executive producer of Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network, Mr. John Chicanda. This broadcast was pre-recorded on Wednesday, July the 8th, the year 2020. Until next time, friends, please be safe, and thanks for listening.